You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes. Liam, I've got a pitch for a violent sports comedy about a hockey player who is great at fighting. You know, an enforcer, a tough guy, a goon.
Love it. We can call it gooning.
Whoa, okay, I have some notes.
Welcome to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies. I'm Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing Goon, the hockey film Goon. And we are joined by our podcasting friend, Discord contributor, all-around movie fanatic that we love to get on the pod and discuss things with. Because it's Josh Skaar from the TalkSMAC podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It's been too long. What was the last one we did? Was that another Marvel thing? I can't even remember at this point.
Most likely.
I think it was Thor. Was it Thor?
Might have been Thor.
Love and Thunder? Yeah. I was a little sad not to get a call for Captain America, but when I heard Robin, I was like, he was the right call.
We went and saw the movie with Robin, so it felt like we should also maybe discuss it with him.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have a monopoly on just Marvel stuff, which is why when you guys invited me over for this one, I was like, hell yeah, I've been meaning to see this one for, almost 15 years, and now I have a really good excuse to watch it.
So, funny story, I actually... very much the same boat. I'd never seen Goon before. I just never got around to it, but it was a great excuse to finally watch it. And I mentioned it to my wife, Nita, and was like, hey, we get to watch Goon. And she was like, I've seen Goon. How have you not seen Goon? And I was like, when did you see Goon? And she, number one, she couldn't believe I hadn't seen it. And number two, was sure she had seen it with me. And now I have no idea who she saw it with. So I'm not saying it's a scandal. It's just neither of us know who she went and saw the movie with.
I've recently been rewatching that 70s show, and they have an episode where Kitty and Red cannot remember how they met. And so they just decide, like, they come up with their own story about how they met. So it's a little bit like that.
What's watching that show like with the context of
it's
the
different.
Actors afterwards?
It's really different. I'm more focused on Fez than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. Don't have heroes, folks.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and speaking of disappointing reality checks, part of the reason we were here, it would be apropos to have Josh on for Captain America, because he is such a big Marvel superhero movies, animations, and comics, as the title of his podcast would suggest. But also from the great state of Illinois. And so we brought you on not to discuss Captain America, but to discuss Goon, because it is a Canadian film. And we're just thought maybe now's a good time for some cross-border goodwill. Well, we still can.
As we know, Illinois famously right near that U.S.-Canada border, not too far, really, Wisconsin and Michigan, Minnesota, all right there. But yeah, in Illinois, Chicago, we're big on hockey. I live in the Rockford area. We have the Rockford Ice Hogs, who are the minor league affiliate to the Chicago Blackhawks. They've been going strong for like 25 years. The people in our area love hockey. And I've loved hockey since the mid to late 90s when I really started becoming aware of sports. So when I remember seeing the trailer for this movie and just being like, yeah, this is something I want to see, like a modern day slap shot, maybe not as classic, because you can't hope for a classic, but you can be surprised that it can be a classic. But this one's definitely cult worthy, to borrow a parlance from my friend Antonio.
Yeah. Yes. Also my first time seeing it, and honestly, kind of dug it. Didn't have a bad time with this movie. I had a couple good laughs. I enjoyed the journey of Doug the Thug Glatt. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, it's got that. I think it's got that raunch factor that you don't see a whole lot in modern comedies. So that's kind of a nice throwback to see. And I guess that's somewhat similar to Slapshot as well. So I'm sure that they had that movie in mind when they were putting this whole thing together, right? So yeah.
This is my second time watching it, and I only had watched it about a year ago. And I'm glad you guys are positive about it, because on a second watch within the span of less than 2 years, you cannot think about this movie too hard, like for a podcast like this, because it like as a film, as a hockey thing, it's great. As a film, it falls apart under the flimsiest of scrutiny. But we'll get into that later. But I you know what? I really liked it the first time I saw it. So.
I really dig that you mentioned that as a hockey film, it is still really fun. And I think this does some of the best hockey cinematography I've seen in a hockey movie. Like you've got your classics like the Mighty Ducks, Slapshot, Miracle, and those all do different things on the ice with the camera. But there's a couple of shots, which we just had the F1 trailer drop recently. And there's moments on the ice where you're like in the puck's perspective, and it kind of felt like that F1 trailer which is drawing heavy inspiration from Top Gun Maverick because it's directed by the guy who directed Top Gun Maverick. But when you're getting bounced around on the stick as the puck and the camera, and some of the camera angles that we're getting from behind the goalkeeper and all this stuff, it visually, at least when it's doing the hockey stuff, it is extraordinarily interesting.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I also agree that, I don't know, maybe this isn't your point, but generally speaking with hockey movies, you don't get a lot of great cinematography, or at least the way that the hockey is shot, if you know anything about hockey, doesn't feel authentic. And I think I had mentioned, maybe this was in our Everybody Wants Some episode, but I talked about Inside Out 2 having great hockey scenes, and like the movement in the animation was very authentic to someone who's been a lifelong hockey fan. And yeah, so it is something that you don't see very often.
I will say there was one moment in the entire movie which actually took me out of the hockey and made me like, I had a visceral reaction to it. And that is at the end of the movie when Laflamme scores his third consecutive goal and there weren't hats raining down on the ice.
Yes.
That I had a visceral reaction to that, and I was angry for a moment.
Those fans would have been ecstatic that Laflamme got a hat trick after he's been struggling for so long with them.
They would have lost their minds. There would have been so many hats raining down on that ice, and there weren't. And
And our fans will lose their minds if I don't give you the specific details of this movie.
Oh, yes.
So that if you haven't seen it, you can catch up. Of course, Goon, released in 2011, directed by Michael Drowse, written by Jay Baruchel and Evan Goldberg. Jay Baruchel, from This Is the End. He's the How to Train Your Dragon kid. He's in Blackberry, one of my favorite movies of 2023. And Evan Goldberg, co-writer with Seth Rogen all the time for Superbad, Pineapple Express, etc. So, based on a book, based on a true story, as it promotes at the beginning, based on Goon, the true story of an unlikely journey into minor league hockey. It stars Sean William Scott as Doug Glatt, Allison Pill as Eva, Jay Baruchel as Pat, Liev Schreiber as Ross Ray. What?
Ross Ray.
Oh, Ross Ray. Yeah.
You got it.
And Marc-Andre Grodin as Laflamme.
I went back and quickly checked on what was going on in the hockey world when this movie was released. One, the Winnipeg Jets had made their return to Winnipeg in 2011. the Bruins beat the Canucks in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final that resulted in the Vancouver riots. And it was also generally, I don't know if I would say it was the beginning of the end of the era of goons in hockey, but certainly this was in that era of the last gasp of them. Today in the NHL, there are none. Like, they're still fighting, but there's no real pure fighters left in the game anymore. The game has changed quite a bit. It's a lot faster now. It's very skill based, and they're just, if you put a goon out there who can barely skate, can't shoot, and can only fight, he's not doing enough for you, and they've basically been erased. So that I don't know if that era is ever going to come back, but certainly I think this movie is maybe at least timely when it was released for being sort of that within that last gasp. And then the second movie is called The Last of the Enforcers, so obviously they were quite aware of what was going on in the league and in hockey in general when they made that sequel. So yeah, just a little. I just thought I'd add the extra context of what the state of hockey was during this period.
Question for you then, Josh and Greg, Scott too. But I know actually, well, Scott, you worked for the Oilers for a while, right? Like
I did.
Okay, sick. I'm the only non-sports, actual nerd here. That's not true. We're all nerds.
So I have to know real quick. How long ago was this? You don't know Connor McDavid, do you?
I don't know him personally, but I announced him coming out on the ice for 2 seasons.
That's awesome.
I was the PA announcer at Rogers Place for 2 seasons when they first moved over to the new arena.
Can you give us, so me, Greg, and Josh are the starting lineup for the,
yes,
what does that sound like?
All right, coming out on the ice. Hold on. Let me think.
Everyone pick a number. I'm number 72.
I want number 57.
420.
72, 57, 420. Making their way to the ice. Your starting lineup for, I have some notes. Coming out first, he's Greg Beaver, number 72. Woo. Coming out next, please welcome to the ice, number 57. It's Josh Skaar.
Boo.
I love you, Josh.
And you know him and you love him. Please welcome to Edmonton Ice, number 420, Liam Creswick. Hopefully that's not so loud that it totally is unusable.
That's what editing is for, right? Sound balancing and all that.
Yeah.
There you go. That's basically what I did for 2 seasons.
Thank you for that, Scott. 'Cause not only was it cool credit to your name, cool example of your craft, but also a nice positive thing as I kind of blow the wind out of the sails of this entire movie. What can the three of you please explain to me? What is the point of fighting in hockey?
So,
like, why?
There was a time in hockey when it was considered to be, maybe not sporting, but it was considered to be a sound tactic to try to take good players out of the game, even just for a while, because that betters your team's chances. And so you'd get like big, tough guys who were okay at hockey, but their main goal was to just like rough up the other team. And that basically caused a nuclear arms race, would be the best way to describe it. Because there came a point where eventually teams would just hire guys for the express purpose of trying to protect their team members and injure the team members on the other team. And that's kind of where the enforcer class of hockey player sort of came into vogue. And Greg is correct that got phased out. Number one, because it's dangerous. Like fighting in hockey is dangerous and brutal. And number two, because fans want to see the skilled players do incredible things. And when they're being constantly laid out, you don't get good hockey, basically is the moral. You get a fun brawl. You don't get good hockey. So
Aaron went to class with Steve McIntyre, who played for the Oilers, and I watched a fight where Steve McIntyre ended the career of Radis Evenins basically in one punch. Like, he knocked him out cold, he fell on the ground, and he never played again. At least in the NHL. So like it is extremely, extremely dangerous. They've changed even today, like for fights that happen in NHL, they used to, like, in Goon, you see them, take their helmet off before they fight. That's not allowed anymore. Because if you fall which often happens when you're fighting, a lot of players were hitting their heads against the ice and getting massive concussions. So, even within the context of fighting now, they've tried to make it, quote unquote, safer. I will say too that the other reason for fighting in hockey, has a lot to do with A, the speed of the game, and B, the fact that you have a piece of lumber in your hand, and your job is to swing it around. And when I played a lot of ball hockey, getting hacked and whacked by sticks is infuriating, and tempers boil over very easily.
Okay.
And
even
there's
today,
a little there's a little bit of strategy to it as well. If you're playing the NHL hockey video games, there's like momentum swings as well. So if your player wins a fight, like, there's a little bit of a momentum shift that happens for you, which, I mean, you can argue the practicality of believing in momentum, but in a sport, especially like hockey and soccer, momentum is a real thing, where if your guys are really tuckered out from playing defense all game, you have no momentum on the offensive side, whereas vice versa, if you have a lot of momentum on offense, you're probably vibing pretty well on defense because you're pretty well rested.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, if you're a home team, if you're playing for your home team and you beat the snot out of the away team in a fight, then the lift you get from the crowd is going to really give you an endorphin boost, which is definitely, it's probably helpful to feel like you're not skating in sand or anything like that.
Oh, and even to both of those points, it can also stall the momentum of the other team. If they're hot right now on the offense and you get in a fight with them, that stalls things out, right? It puts them on the back foot for a moment, and that can give you the opportunity to kind of get something together, right? So.
Nice. Well, thank you for asked and answered. I came in here all sanctimonious and high and mighty, thinking there wasn't going to be a good reason other than bread and circuses. And you've given me 3 very valid reasons, so I'll spare my little diatribe that I had cooked up to be like, nah, I think it's stupid. So, yeah, great. Let's move on to the
to your point, if you go to a hockey game and you hear someone go, "I hope there's a fight," you're probably sitting next to a bad hockey fan, so you probably want to ignore that person.
Yeah. I would say that I'm not someone who is like fighting has to stay in the game. Like, if they did what they do in other sports, which is basically like kick you out immediately as soon as you do something like that, I don't think I would have a problem with that, because I'm there to see the skill more than I am the fights, right? So,
and I think more fans are there to see the skill nowadays than to see someone get the snot kicked out of them. Yeah.
Most of the characters in this movie would disagree, but hey, that's what
this movie's a period piece. It's in an earlier time in the juniors, no less. It's like in a minor hockey league team.
Nice. Well, let's go to the trailer summary, and then we'll talk about our thoughts and get into some notes. We're talking about Doug the Thug Glatt tonight. What a story. This kid started out as a small town bouncer at a Boston bar, but when he starts throwing hands in the stands at the local hockey game, you know he's going to catch the attention of the coach.
That's right, Liam. Doug may have made a name for himself in his hometown team, but it wasn't long before he was scouted by the Halifax Highlanders to protect their star player, moody bad boy, Xavier Laflamme.
Now, lots have been said about Glatt and Laflemme's contentious relationship on and off the ice, but make no mistake, Glatt is a true blue team player. Heart of gold and a jaw of steel, that guy. It's Laflemme, along with Glatt's parents, who need an attitude adjustment.
I couldn't agree with you more, Liam.
Though speaking of his heart, Doug has been known to wear it on his sleeve. Let's hope that local doe-eyed cutie Eva doesn't shatter it before Doug and the boys can secure the wins they need to make it to the playoffs.
And moving to this year's playoffs, they are shaping up to be a doozy. Legendary enforcer Ross Ray and the rest of the St. John's Shamrocks are set to face off against the beloved Highlanders just in time for Ray to retire at the end of the season.
The stakes have never been higher, Scott. Ross is looking to prove he's still got that dog in him, so you know he's got the young upstart Doug Glatt in his sights. With both men having so much to prove, you know it's going to be a barn burner when the gloves come off and the elbows go up.
Let's go to the highlights.
Amazing.
End scene. Scott and I have both been known to tread the boards.
Got to put on my radio voice for a bit there.
And I got to put on my 5 beers drunk voice.
You had a little Chicago in there. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I was okay. I'm glad you hit us with the Chicago voice. I was trying to do a Don Cherry thing, but I was a little all over the place.
Yeah, the Boston's a little hotter.
Yeah. There is something about this movie. One of the things I liked about it, and same true is for Letterkenny, but it's also true for like Kunk on Earth. There is something about thick regional accents that lend itself so well to comedy. It's,
Charlie Berens has made a career out of it already, and all he's doing is going around doing the Wisconsin accent, talking about the Fleet Farm there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And there are a lot of good accents in this movie.
As someone from the Midwest who is, from my perspective, is like the most boring accent out there, hearing the Canadian accents and like a little bit of the Russian accent, and then obviously the Boston, Massachusetts accent, that one always takes me back because there's a time when I went on spring break in high school where some friends and I went to Boston and we got lost going to our destination, and we ended up in a grocery store just trying to find anyone who could give us directions. And we find this guy. He's like, "Oh yeah, what you got to do is you got to go down to Parkland and you got to take a right and then you got to go left. And then you're going to find that next Parkland and you're going to go that way. And then you're going to get there." And so we're looking for Parkland. We're going at where we're going and we're trying to find Parkland. And as we're driving around in a circle for probably a good 20 minutes, we realize we're in Massachusetts. We're in Boston. He said Parkland. He meant Parkland.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was always, I especially before I started doing world traveling, I was the worst at deciphering accents. They would completely flummox me. And the first time I went out it was the only time I backpacked across Europe, I would meet Americans who would automatically know I was Canadian. I'm like, and I just didn't like, I couldn't figure out how they understood like immediately. Cause I was like, I'm talking like you talk. What are you talking about? There's subtleties about the Canadian accent that Americans can pick up on that I'm completely oblivious to.
I had a similar reality check. I very briefly did English voiceover for anime, out of a studio that was done Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, but it was all remote for Asian markets needing English dub for stuff that like only played in across the Pacific Ocean. And they had me not try to, like, they were like, you can't sound so Canadian. And the one that got me was sorry. And they were like, no, you got to say sorry. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get. And then it's like, that's where it clicked for me.
It's that hard. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But it's also why I don't do anime voiceover anymore. Cause I don't think I didn't have the training to not have an Alberta accent or a Canadian accent. So I slowly phased out. But what about this movie? What'd you like about this movie?
I like Doug. I think for a guy who's not got a lot going on, like he's not the deepest thinker. He's still very, very likable and relatable. And despite the fact that basically Sean William Scott rolled a barbarian and used intelligence as his dump stat, he's still got a lot of like emotional intelligence in the movie. And he knows, he's like self-aware, but he like self-aware enough to like lean into his strengths. And I appreciate that a lot. Like he didn't come across as stupid as he believes he is. And I think that that's one of the things that really endeared me to him.
Yeah, he's very charming and charismatic in a very subtle way, but it also comes across as sincere. And I really appreciated his performance in the movie, which, not getting too deep into my fixes, I do think the movie kind of has a different interpretation of Doug than Sean William Scott did. But I think through his charm, he kind of still made it work in a way that you're like, I love this guy. He's great.
Yeah, he kind of has puppy dog eyes throughout the movie, even during some of the more violent scenes, which I think is kind of hilarious. And I loved his reactions to his fellow hockey players on the ice, like always thanking them and stuff like that. It was
He's
very
so appreciative. It's great.
Cute, yeah.
Yeah.
I love his team spirit too. Like, just like, no, I'm a hockey player and this is my team and this is what I do. And how that slowly kind of wins over some of the more cynical people on the team, especially LaFlamme. I'm a sucker for that kind of story.
That right there, I think is the heart of the movie that I think the people writing it completely missed. And like they didn't even know they were doing it. And had they known, they could have done it better. Doug is a static character. Doug is a Paddington.
Yeah.
He isn't there to have an arc. He is there to give everyone else around him an arc, to bring them in to his worldview of like team spirit, being a part of something, backing up the people you care about. And I don't think the people writing it realized that, because no one else has an arc in this movie. No one has an arc in this movie. And the only person it's okay for is Doug, because he doesn't need one. He's a static character. Like the classic static example is Paddington.
Yeah.
You read my notes, because that was one of my things that I brought up was the character. Doug has no growth. He is, once he learns how to skate, he is as complete of a character as he will ever be in this movie. But it's everyone around him that rallies and buys into his warmth and his camaraderie that he has for his teammates and his found family.
Yeah, and his respect for, weirdly, his respect for the game too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Despite coming to it so late in life. Yeah, I felt like I quite enjoyed. This is the second time seeing it, and I was cringing a little bit, worrying that I would feel like it was a movie out of time. And there were, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's elements of this that obviously would be quite different were it made today. But I don't know. There's just a charm to the humor that kind of gets you over top of some of its like homophobic elements and things like that, and you're not really thinking about it as much. I do think that despite the fact that like there's some plot lines that kind of go nowhere and are somewhat pointless, I was there for rooting for LaFlamme to get over his hump and rooting for Glatt the whole way. So yeah, it was still holds up pretty well.
Yeah, I think the locker room talk is forgivable, not just because of when it came out, but just like that's sort of part of an all male sports culture. I assume. Yeah. I wouldn't know. It's not how we talk at the Magic the Gathering tournament, but I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Having been in many a hockey locker room, this is yes, this is
that
accurate.
all tracked it, and it had that same kind of. I think it also tracked because not just because it's locker room sports talk, but it's got that regional accent chutzpah behind it, because like you expect a guy who's to maybe say some colorful languages when he's speaking in such a for lack of a better word, folksy accent, whatever region his folk are from. Where I think this movie, the hyper masculinity of this movie does sort of come through in a way that is at best a bummer, at worst problematic. Eva is possibly the most underwritten female character I have ever seen in a movie. Ever. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm trying to think of like a flimsier female character. I cannot.
Yeah, I mean her arc is pretty rough, to say the least. Which is, I mean, if you're gonna, if you're
dialogue is rough.
Yeah.
It's a shame because Alison Pill is delightful.
Yes. None of this is for Miss Pill. She was on our trap episode. I'm sorry to, we did this to Opie once. We're doing it to Alison Pill now here, but like really, so not only does she have some really cringy dialogue, like at one point after their first date, she's like, Eva likes Doug. Doug likes Eva. That's some like Tumblr blog fanfic romance writing that like a teenager with no relationship experience would put on paper. It is not what two adult men, Goldberg and Barenschell, should be having their adult female characters say. But so that's a very micro example, but like her whole deal is that she falls for Doug. She can tell he's going to treat her right, but she quote unquote has a boyfriend. That is her whole deal. She likes Doug, but she has a boyfriend. And they can probably see in the video chat, I'm putting air quotes over has a boyfriend because it is the parameters of that relationship are never defined. The boyfriend is never given a name. And what her romantic or sexual availability is never really defined. Like at one point she calls herself, she's like, I'm a slut. I'm just too horny, which is weird. That's not how women talk, horny or otherwise. But even if that was true, that she's some sort of floozy who gets around, when we see her with her boyfriend, they seem to live together and he seems like a nice, handsome, like Ken doll looking friendly guy. He's not a dirtbag. He's not a dweeb. He's just a generic man. And so like, is she a dumb slut or is she in this committed relationship with a guy and she made up with a hockey player in a bar? Like, what does it mean to have a boyfriend? And why is it like it's all nothing? Her whole backstory is nothing.
Yeah. And probably the greater sin is that none of that is funny. Yeah. So like in a comedy, like it's just like there's nothing that she does or says that is particularly funny, and there's nothing really funny about the situation either.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it really underserves the character and the actress as well.
Yeah, and you could take every time she says my boyfriend and replace it with an STI, and the plot wouldn't change. I can't date you, Doug, because I have herpes. Like it literally, it's the same. It functionally is the same problem. She just has a nebulous problem that is keeping her from Doug, and then she gets over it.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really good extension of one of the things that immediately after I watched this movie, like I was like, I'm so glad I actually enjoyed that movie. I really liked it. And I think that's part of why I've waited like 15 years to watch it, is because I was like, there's this hockey comedy out there that I really want to see, but I don't want it to be bad. So it's better to just not know and just hope that it's still good than sit down and watch it and find out that it's bad, which it's not. It is good and it's charming, but this movie doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it Rocky? Is it Forrest Gump? Is it the Mighty Ducks? It's got these three different elements of sports movie in it, but it never commits to any of them. Like, not that Forrest Gump is a sports movie, but like sometimes the movie feels like they're playing Doug up to be Forrest Gump and Eva is a little bit Jenny. And then sometimes Doug is more like Fulton from the Mighty Ducks, and he's just kind of getting his feet underneath him, and eventually he will rise. And then other times he's Rocky, where he's got this one thing to do, and he's going to do whatever he can to see that mission to completion, win, lose, draw, whatever it may be. But he will come out of it having done the thing. And maybe in this case, Eva is his Adrian, which the end of the movie definitely plays that up. But that's one of the things that, as I was thinking a little more critically about the movie after the fact, the movie can't pick a lane. Is it a sports comedy like Slapshot? Is it more of a sports dramedy, almost in the vein of like Rocky 3 with the robot and stuff? Like where does the line draw? But the movie can't figure it out. And like this is a movie that feels like it could be 20 minutes longer to flesh out some things. And you still you wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't be like, well, why did they add that 20 minutes? Like this movie is something that needs to be a little more padded and it would benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
I had similar notes, both in length and just, it's 50% comedy, 50% drama, and it needs to be one or the other.
Yeah. I do feel like it does have pacing issues in general. The editing is sometimes off, and we're getting cuts that feel too early, and scenes kind of drift from one to another very quickly without any kind of smooth transition. And it's not not that comedies need necessarily be the most, well, no, I guess I shouldn't say that. Editing can play a big role in comedy, so I shouldn't say it's not important. So,
Ask Edgar Wright.
What's that?
I said ask Edgar Wright about editing in comedy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree that the movie needed to be a little longer to let some of this stuff breathe. And if you want another example of a plot line that goes nowhere, his parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're introduced early on. They show back up partway through and are still disappointed with him. And then that is never resolved. It's just a thing that happens. And
Eugene Levy collects his paycheck.
Yeah. Like the scene where they show up to his hockey game could have been better served with different characters, basically, because if you're not going to pay off that relationship anyway, have him have a little bit with his folks at the synagogue at the beginning and then never see them again because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And you don't waste Eugene Levy. Like Eugene Levy does not say a single funny thing in this movie.
Yeah. At the very least, like he could have like a defying moment where he tells them like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, whether you like it or not. You've always been dragging me down or whatever. But instead, I think that last scene with his parents is part of the typical low point at the end of the second act before we transition into the third act. So it doesn't feel like a resolution. It feels just like that's like a hanging bit that's going to be resolved later and just doesn't.
But again, because Doug is such a flat character, and not that's not a criticism of Doug. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need to hit a low point like that because he's not having a traditional character arc. That could have, if you wanted to have a low point, it had to be the rest of the team that has a low point so that he can be there to rally them back up, right?
Yeah.
So,
or LaFlemme hits the rock bottom, which is one of my notes.
Yeah, because LaFlemme doesn't hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other, as not only does that parent scene go nowhere, but it also, there's a scene immediately after it that highlights that this movie doesn't know whether it wants to be a comedy or a drama. And it's where him and Jay Baruchel's character are sitting on the hood, and Pat is the character's name, is being like, dude, you're so good at that. Watching you tonight, it was like a miracle. It was like watching a virtuoso. It was like watching birds fly, man. And he gives him this like, you're a savant, you're a virtuoso, keep doing what you're doing, shine on, you crazy diamond speech. And he is talking to a goon, like a guy who punches minor hockey league guys. Like this isn't, like this isn't a Bach biopic. Like he is still a goon, and that you either can't take it that seriously without kind of looking silly, or you have that scene and it is played kind of ironically, like kind of like Dodgeball, where it's like, we gotta do this. It's so important to, save this. Like it needed to be more like Dodgeball, kind of like it needed to know that it was a silly thing that didn't matter. It needed its ESPN 8 kind of moment that like the stakes are high for these characters, but in reality, this is kind of stupid. Whereas it wants us to take fist fighting in minor league hockey super, super seriously.
Yeah.
That's one thing you actually just triggered. I didn't have it in my notes, but was anyone else really kind of thrown off by the broadcaster for the team? It was like they wanted to be Bob Uecker in Major League, but they also wanted to keep it a little more grounded. But they would throw in things every now and then where he's just like, oh, that was faster than the time I had sex with my wife last night. Just weird offhanded comments like that. But like it wasn't on the level of Bob Uecker, but it also just wasn't quite funny. Like it was really weird.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe they were, I don't know, a little too shy with that character, because I think it would have been great if he was quite quippy the way that Bob Uecker was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two greatest movie broadcasters for me: Bob Uecker in Major League, John Candy in Rookie of the Year.
Nice. Well, let's go to our fixes then, because I think there's lots here to love, but also lots here to fix. We are gonna literally punch up this movie about fist fighting. We'll be back with our fixes for Goon.
I'd like to get more reading done, and joining a book club seems like a good idea, but I don't know.
Why not?
Reading a whole book in a month, that's pretty daunting.
What if it was just a chapter, say a week?
That doesn't sound too bad. Still, getting together with a bunch of people, that's a whole evening.
Well, what if it was only half an hour, whenever you wanted to?
That would be great.
The Read Along, a mini book club for your ears.
Join my wife Anita
And my husband Scott
as we take you on a journey through a good book,
one chapter at a time. Available right now on your podcatcher of choice.
Sweet Caroline. Bum, bum, bum.
Hot and Ready Pizza 73, available on the concourse. Don't forget to get your 50/50 tickets. Tonight's estimated jackpot is up to $2,552.
And we're back. We're going to keep that in the edit. Don't forget to get your 50/50 tickets, because we are going to fix Goon. I want to start with a little one, and then I want to hear what you guys have for some bigger fixes. I actually had quite a lot to say on this film, but I'm going to try to keep it tight. But it's a little one. I'm going to start us off with: the soundtrack is all over the place. They needed to have some directorial vision on what goes in the soundtrack. We've got Rush early on, sure. Canadian classic. We love Rush. Jock Jam's appropriate. There is, when they go on their first date to the coffee shop, there's like silly banjo music when he gets his little heart broken. There's bagpipes when the Shamrocks enter. There's classical epic sports movie score during the final scene. The end credit music is some kind of like goofy, like white guy rap thing. It is, I did not understand the musical choices. They were completely discordant. There was no leitmotif, like Doug's theme, Eva's song. It was just like, put some music here. Cool. It sounds good for that scene, but like no cohesion. So one of my notes, soundtrack cohesion.
I wonder, is that sometimes maybe a function of a low budget movie where it's just, I mean, it probably wasn't scored. I mean, they were probably just buying whatever music tracks they could afford and throwing them in. So I wonder if that's part of the confusion. I mean, you're still not wrong that like you can make better choices.
Look, I'm here to give notes, not solutions.
Those are your problems to fix, not mine.
Yeah. Take it out of the money you spent getting the rights to Rush. Like,
yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Totally understandable. I didn't notice the music at all. So it was complete zero for me. So I don't know, take that for what you will, for good or for ill.
I mean, I can keep going, but I want to know what you guys have.
No, we're all thinking about the music now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with Greg though. I cannot remember a single chord of anything. Like you said, Rush was in there. I didn't catch it at all.
Yeah. I
mean,
did
a good score you like, a great score you notice, a good score you don't, but then a bad score you do notice. And I think it was where I heard the silly banjo music as he was walking away dejected from his date, where I was like, wait a minute, what's going on behind? Like,
I want more characterization with the team. I want to get to know more of the teammates. Like some of them, you get little more than just like, that's Bill over there. He does a thing. And then it never really comes back up. And if our conception of the movie is to more center Doug and have everybody else have character arcs around him, the team are the most important people around him. And so the coach needs to be better developed. Some of the key team members, like the goaltender needs to have a better arc. The 2 Russian players need to have a better arc. Laflamme definitely needs to have a better arc because he's the hotshot star player, right? The team captain going through his divorce needs to have a better arc. Like they all needed to be better developed. I agree that Eva needed to be better developed. And I think that this is number one, where Josh's earlier comment about the movie needing to be longer comes in, because you could have used 10 or 15 more minutes to play with that. And some of the drama around Doug, where you're trying to force a character arc into him, like the stuff with his parents, you can drop. And that's better served with giving us a little more time with him interacting with the team, using what tools he has at his disposal to help them with their problems, and also to like just be the heart of the team and have them rally around him. Right. So, yeah.
I think that his journey in helping the team find itself too would be better served if he was treated maybe worse by the team, or at least if there were more people, more players that were not nice to him other than
at first
Laflamme. Yeah, at first, like Laflamme can definitely be like the last guy that comes on board. But I was thinking about that guy who's kind of like the ass kisser to the captain. Like, I actually think it would be funnier if he was ass kissing Laflamme, just because he knows that he's like this great player and he just kind of like looks up to him or whatever. And that Laflamme's kind of don't give a shit attitude, I think, would play better off of that and offer the opportunity for more comedy. But it'd also give you that extra person who is, the guy who's chirping Glatt even more, just out of like sycophancy or whatever. So, yeah.
Interesting you mentioned, Laflamme kind of having a sycophant he's abusing. I think Laflamme's arc could be so much better than what it is here, because he is such a bog standard hotshot star who is going to be the last to get on board with our new heart of the team. You see this character in every sports movie, every sports comedy, real like season 1. What's the Ted Lasso? I had it written. Jamie Tart. Real Tart. Season 1 Jamie Tart.
That, yeah.
And what I think would be more interesting, especially if we get more time with him, it isn't that he immediately is like, screw you, I don't need you, I'm too good for you. Laflamme should be like, this guy's been brought in to protect me and he's unbeatable. He's a barbarian. I'm going to use him to be even more obnoxious, and now I'm invincible. Like, I can run my mouth on the ice, I can pick fights, because this guy's going to come in and clean up my mess. And Laflamme's arc isn't just like coming around on him like it is in this movie and every other sports movie. Laflamme's arc is being so profoundly obnoxious and abusive and manipulative, and demeaning to Doug, that eventually Doug has to break his rule and knock some sense into him, because Doug doesn't hit his teammates. And it has to get to the point where Laflamme isn't being a teammate. He isn't being a Highlander, and needs to get cold cocked some sense into him. And that is way more interesting than just him being like, I'm too good for you. I'm too good for you. Okay. I guess we can be pals. It's the end of the movie.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I like where you're going with that, because you can still leave a key moment in the movie in there with what's going on, because if you have Laflamme as the Jamie Tart kind of character, but you add in the fact that he has the yips, he can't perform the way he did, which is why he's in the minor leagues. So he's all talk and no show. And then you add into the fact that he is abusing Doug the way he is and abusing his ability to be the enforcer for him to the point where Doug doesn't view him as a teammate, or he he allows himself to have a lapse where he lets the guy go after LaFlemme and he knocks him out before he has that big fight with or the big opportunity to fight with Ray. That's when he goes and gets himself suspended, because not only is he beating up the guy who hit the guy he's supposed to protect, but he let himself down because he let him through intentionally. So there's an actual character arc there for Doug, instead of Doug just like, oh, I'm a bad skater, he got by me and now he's hurt.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe, and that's actually maybe a little more nuanced than, coked out LaFlemme finally just needing to get some sense knocked into him by our hero. Our hero doesn't hit his teammates, but he isn't going to protect his teammates either. Like he's going to protect someone who isn't his teammate.
Yeah.
What's that?
He isn't going to protect that guy specifically because he's
right?
not being a team player.
And he lets someone else kick the shit out of him, and that's how he gets his lesson learned. I like that a lot. So also throw this out there, because I was complaining about how, it's unclear whether Eva is some sort of trollop or something. Like she calls herself a slut, and then but also is in this committed relationship with a guy and makes out with a hockey player. If you want to give some clarity to what her situation is, make her someone who isn't committed, make her someone who gets around. And one of the people she gets around with, LaFlemme. And Doug just sits there and takes it because he's a team player and he's so mad. And the two of them betray him in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because she says, like, oh, I love hockey guys. I love the violence. I'm just here for idiot hockey guys. And who's a bigger idiot hockey guy than LaFlemme?
Yeah. I would like to see LaFlemme have a moment with Doug where it's either stated outright or implied that there's some sort of acknowledgement from LaFlemme that he's scared.
Sure.
And that can be the moment that gives Doug a moment of empathy for LaFlemme, and you can have that moment be where he tells him, like, I'll always be there to protect you from this point out, kind of thing. Like, you can count on me. And then that transitions right into them, winning that next game.
You know how that scene where he tells them that they're both laying in their own beds with a wall between them?
Yeah.
What if Eva's in the bed? Well, he says that to him. Yeah. Anyway, I just had that thought.
I still like having Ross.
Narratively, where does that go after that?
That's the big, he's like really laying it out for him. Like, I'll never betray you. And then the two of them are saying, I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if that puts LaFlemme into too far into like irredeemable territory though, because if he is using Eva, the love interest for our main protagonist, is that too far gone for LaFlemme? Like, I don't know, that seems like maybe a step too far, where if she's just having flings like a Jenny and Forrest Gump, and she like, it's just nameless guys, but she keeps coming back to Doug because he fulfills something emotionally, not just physically for her. And so like, that's kind of where I think Eva's story kind of should have gone, instead of, like you said, just this really inconsistent idea of like, I'm in a committed relationship, but I like you, but I'm in a committed relationship until I'm not.
If you want to have her hook up with LaFlemme, then you need to introduce the two of them together. She's LaFlemme's current rink rat, basically at the beginning of the movie, and then because she meets Doug at the beginning that way, she gets to know him, and then because LaFlemme goes through women, I mean, he's not going to stick with her. He's not committed to her. She ends up with Doug later on, basically.
Interesting. I talked to Amanda about this when I was pitching this idea of like, maybe LaFlemme is an abrasive asshole who manipulates Doug's goodwill in many ways, on the ice, off the ice, and with his romantic interest. There is something a little more ice cold about Doug having their meet cute at the bar, bringing her to meet the team, and then one of the many transgressions is he introduces her to the team, and LaFlemme betrays that trust as well. Yeah, maybe
that's still more of an act
wrong answer
thing.
for either.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's still more of an Act 2 thing, though. So
Yeah.
I still love all the team stuff, but I still think the external threat of end boss Ross Ray is important. Especially because that is the one arc that really works in this movie is the old enforcer whose career is ending coming up against the new guy. And I love it. I love Liev Schreiber in this role, and I definitely don't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Sorry, I know I've been talking a lot, but you are right. It is the one arc that works, kind of, because we see the end of it. So in the same problem with his parents, how the arc of his parents' approval gets set up and then never paid off. Mm-hmm. The face-off with, no pun intended, the face-off with with Ross is never set up, but it is paid off. Like, we hear that, this is the guy that beat up LaFlamme. Oh, we hear he's been suspended or whatever. But we never see Ross until they're sitting in that diner. And I think a scene of him living hard, doing some home stitching to all of the many wounds he's occurred over the years, living like a mid-level athlete does, a single guy, eating raw hot dogs and drinking warm beer and whatever. What future might be held for Doug if he continues down this path? I wanted one or two scenes where we meet Ray, in the same reason we need one scene where his parents go, we do approve. We need one early on of Ray showing us what his deal is. Why he is the foil to Doug.
One of my notes is if we go more into the Rocky territory of this sports movie and we build up Ross Ray as our Apollo Creed, and we have Doug building up towards this confrontation, one of the things that we need to fix is the length of the season that we're in, because the first time these two are supposed to meet is with 4 games left in the season. Not that it matters to casual viewers, but to me as a sports person and someone who follows the sport pretty closely, 4 games is not a lot of time. So when Doug is suspended for the one game where they would have met for the first time, and then they're meeting again in the final game of the season, I think you create different circumstances where maybe Ross Ray is still serving his suspension the first time they meet, when it's the middle of the season and they're about to get their all-star break, and that's where you can do some more family stuff where Doug goes back home, all this sort of stuff. You set up the Adrian not wanting Rocky to fight kind of stuff, and then you have a game where Doug does his thing, but without Ross Ray. So it's what would this team look like if Ross Ray were on the team against Doug? How would that battle of the enforcers work? And then Doug gets suspended the next time they're supposed to meet, because there's 3 meetings left in the year. Mm-hmm. You've got the one before the break. Yeah. You've got one somewhere in the middle of the second half of the season. Then you've got the final game of the season where they're both there. And Doug's fighting from underneath because he's injured, which I don't necessarily like that idea either. Because again, I like the Rocky idea where it's just grit versus grit. It's not our Paddington is hurt. He can't climb the rope as well as he should be able to, but he's going to try his damnedest. So I think that's one thing that needs to blend in here a little bit better in the movie, is the length of the season needs to be more well defined, and you need to set up, this is the first time these two are ever going to meet. Oh, wait, circumstances have happened. They're not. Now this time, nope, more circumstances. And then finally you build up to it and you have your opportunity.
Well, that's really smart too, because then you have the tease at the beginning of the season. And when Ross isn't there because he's still serving his suspension, and you're right. And they have and I think they still lose that game, which shows that the team is still good even without Ross. How much worse would it be if he had been there? Because LaFlamme still has the yips. The team hasn't come together. The second time, the team is starting to gel because Doug's been there for a while, but because this is right after he let that guy through on LaFlamme. He's now serving his suspension because he beat the crap out of that guy after, and now Ray's on the team. And we get to see firsthand how dirty a player he is. unrepentantly bad. And Doug it feels terrible that he can't be there to help them. And they just run roughshod over them. So now there's like real stakes going into that last one. Doug's going to actually be there this time to protect them. Ray's still going to be on the ice. How's this going to go? I think that builds that final game up really well. Also, I just want to add, I love that the movie ends with them making the playoffs. It's not even for like a championship. It's just, will they make the playoffs or not? Perfect. Love it. Don't change that.
I was going to say that by having it focus on the two enforcers fighting and not necessarily the team winning or losing the games, for a sports movie, whether or not the team wins is kind of inconsequential. It's more about Doug's relationship to these other characters and his belief in himself. Whether or not they make it to the playoffs or even win a single game is irrelevant. It's which fist fights does Doug win? Which fist fights do other hockey players win or lose? The goals are irrelevant.
I had an idea, and this is sort of adjacent to Josh, that I was wondering if like maybe the first Doug would meet Ross Ray earlier in the season and get beat by him, perhaps because he had been Laflamme had been taunting Ross Ray, and he has to fight him, and it's the first time that he meets someone who is just as vicious a fighter as he is, and he loses, and that can instill a fear in Doug that is somewhat similar to the fear that Laflamme is feeling, so that their two paths kind of have a similar arc to them. I don't know if that necessarily works, but it's just something that I was thinking of as we were going through that.
So one thing I do want to praise really quickly is while we're talking about this relationship between Doug and Ross Ray, Liev Schreiber's character, that scene in the diner is fantastic. Liev Schreiber's doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But it is so good. And I love the idea of Ross Ray, this grizzled veteran of hockey, this goon enforcer that Doug kind of looks up to. He's telling him, don't try to be a hockey player. And I think that is part of what this movie maybe should have been, is Doug's growth on the ice. He may not be the best at shooting a shot, but that's also where you can work in his relationship with Laflamme, is that as their relationship grows, maybe Laflamme's using Doug in different ways. Like maybe that first goal off of Doug's butt is because Laflamme's like, oh, hey, this is something that could be really funny or something that could work. So he does it, and Doug gets a goal and they get to have a moment. And I think that could be a good capstone for like, hey, they're friends now. But instead it's just played off as a quick gag, and Doug is still not the best skater. He's still not the best at anything other than being an obstruction to the opposing goalie and throwing fists when it's called for.
You're absolutely right about that diner scene, and I think that just proves, not the right word, but reaffirms my point that how much better would it have been if we had met Ray once already, or if Doug had encountered him, or if we as the audience had seen, like I said, Ray stitching himself, like spitting blood into his dirty sink and, draining eye wounds, and like living hard. And that's the difference. If Ray is some kind of grim look into Doug's potential future, the difference between Ray and Doug, Ross and Doug, I guess, first name, last name. Ross is an enforcer. Doug is a hockey player.
Yeah, that's the character growth. I love that.
Yeah.
And I would also add in that Doug needs to meet Ross Ray at least once before, where he more or less just kind of shrugs him off. He's like, yeah, whatever, just another guy. Yeah. And then as the season progresses, we see through the classic sports montage, Ross Ray is paying attention to what Doug is doing. And then you get that back and forth in the diner, which it's not really much of a back and forth. Doug's just like accepting the compliments and being like, well, I am a hockey player. I play hockey, therefore I am a hockey player, in the most simplest terms. But it shows the distinction between the two guys, where Doug is this hopeful, he's living his best life. He's living his dream. And Ross Ray has lived his best life, and now he's just kind of going through the motions. And that's where his appreciation for who and what Doug does and is where the movie really shines in that moment. Because again, it's not full-fledged Apollo Creed has given Rocky his respect after the fight. It is, he has earned his respect because he sees the good in him, not just the goon in him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've definitely solved some of the character arcs for this film. I have one more note if you'll indulge me, unless we have more thoughts on the themes and the thing. For a movie, this movie is ostensibly about fighting in hockey. It's less about the hockey itself. To that end, it's almost less of a sports movie and more of a martial arts movie. And all of this to say, the fight scenes in this are cut to shit. It is so many quick, fast edits that if you look, like I was saying at the beginning, if you look at them too closely, you're like, actually, this action kind of sucks. Like, if you're only kind of half watching the movie, you're like, oh yeah, things are moving, fists are flying, blood's going everywhere. It's a fight. It's a hockey fight. And I know hockey fights are fun because I've seen one. But like, if you think about like a highlight reel of a hockey fight, the camera lingers on the guys, 4 or 5 blows between them before a new angle, any kind of a cut. Whereas this is chopped to shit. And I really would have liked to see it treat hockey fighting like a martial arts movie where we get to see some of these blows, some of these like ducks and dodges. If that's the hook of the movie, then maybe put your money there.
Right. I think there was at least one fight that was from a little bit further out, because I seem to recall Doug's fight with George Larac. They were just like trading blows over and over and over again, and I don't think that one had as many quick cuts. So definitely, if there was more of that, I agree with you. Yeah.
Also, no one gets jerseyed in this movie.
Yeah.
Another glaring omission, like the hat trick.
But I think the longest shot in any of the fight scenes is the one where he's like trying to prove himself to LaFlamme, and he just gives those 3 uppercuts to the one guy. While not breaking eye contact with LaFlamme.
I love that. That scene was so good.
That was like the most pure comedy shot of the movie. Like this is a comedy moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The comedy inherent to the violence, I think, like, is one of the ways you add to the comedy. First of all, what Scott said about just like meeting more of the team is how you can up the comedy. And I think also leaning into the over the top violence of it. Like, that's kind of the hook. That's why it's rated R. That's why it starts with a slow-mo tooth. And I was likening it to like Kick-Ass. This sort of like funny glorification of hyper violence.
Mm-hmm.
It should have more of a Kick-Ass tone and or more of a Dodgeball tone, but less of a just like fake ass sloppily edited. I don't know. Maybe it was just one that really stood out to me and I hung on it for the whole movie, but there was definitely one fight where it was like cut, like Jay in the stands, guys getting punched, edited
better. The last thing I'll say, I do wish the movie would have characterized Doug a little bit better, because they do play him a little too close to like, I don't know the proper way to say this. With is he Forrest Gump, or is he just like a sad guy that's unfulfilled, but he's not smart enough to become a doctor like his family wants? Or, like where is he on any kind of spectrum? And you don't have to like explicitly define it, but just say like, oh, he got out of high school with straight D's, like just something that says he's unmotivated. He just hasn't found his thing. The movie plays a little too loose with some of these things. Where is he what the heck is it? Ralphie from What's Eating Gilbert Grape? Like, he's not going full Leo DiCaprio and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. He's not going Tom Hanks. He's just this dim-witted goofball that if he considers you family, he'll go to bat for you. But the movie plays it a little too close to where like, oh, he's got a mental deficiency maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Amanda made a similar observation.
Yeah, it seems somewhat inconsistent too. Like the opening scene with him in the bar doing the bouncer thing, I didn't really get the sense that he was particularly dim-witted.
He came across more apathetic.
Exactly. So yeah, if they were choosing a lane there, I think it would have been better and funnier. For sure, yeah.
And I think that's where a better part of the emotional core comes in, is that he's unfulfilled in Massachusetts. He doesn't know what to do other than bounce. And now all of a sudden he's up in Canada. He's playing hockey. He has teammates. He has friends. He has a potential girlfriend.
He has fans.
He has fans. He has adoration from people. And that's one of the things that he's talking about with Jay Baruchel's character, is that he's got his TV show where even though he's getting prank called every week, he at least has people who recognize him and engage with his show.
Mm-hmm. Those prank calls, by the way, had us in stitches when we were watching it. Like, it was so good. And I did love Jay Baruchel in this movie. He was fantastic. Just like nonstop energy. I just I found that very funny and endearing.
Yeah, it was. You could tell he was excited to play that character. Like, he put a lot of that writing his own character into it.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Josh. You're our guest, and I really wanted to give you the last word because that was very canny, but I forgot I had one more very dumb note.
How dare you?
How dare I? You got the real last word. I think it's a real missed opportunity that the name of this fake hockey team was not the Halifax Explosions. Just what a waste.
As an American,
too soon.
As an American, I need a little more context, please.
In the 1800s, a ship exploded in Halifax Harbor, and it was known as the Halifax Explosion.
It was not a small explosion. It was
the equivalent. Yeah, it was almost the equivalent of like a nuclear bomb going off.
Oh my gosh. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's actually a pretty good story.
I'll be awake a little bit longer because now I'm very interested.
It's an interesting piece of trivia, for sure. And a little bit of fascinating Canadian history. If any of our listeners are unfamiliar with the Halifax Explosion, find a YouTube video talking about it. Look it up on Wikipedia. You'll be interested. It's a gripping story.
There's a heritage moment about it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not the Canadian Chernobyl, though, right?
In that there's not no still
nuclear
radiation.
Fallout.
You know what it is? It's the Canadian Boston fire, or whatever, the cow that kicked over the. Was that Boston?
That might have been the Chicago fire, the Great Chicago
Fire. Jesus, we got a Chicago guest on. Sorry. It is likened to the Chicago Fire. It is
okay.
Yeah.
Which coincidentally, the Chicago soccer team, the Chicago Fire.
See, they have a sense of humor.
There you go.
It's not too soon. Is the Chicago Fire's mascot a cow, like Mrs. O'Leary's cow that kicks over?
Fireball. I'm not 100% sure. Although the cow would be really good. And you call him Fireball.
Yeah. Incredible. Speaking of incredible, our listeners are incredible. Thank you to everyone who contributed. We solicit these on our Discord and on our social media. So whenever we're looking for notes, please send them your way. We love it when you contribute to the conversation. Aaron says, the only guy I went to school with that got into the NHL was an enforcer, and he was also the only hockey player that wasn't a raging dickhead, so I love Doug, the gentle-hearted goon. I think they could cut down the dinner scene with Doug's parents and just have them not show up in the story at all, since that storyline is dropped anyway. Maybe give the movie some more time to flesh out his relationship with his brother, or they could have added more scenes of the build-up to Doug and Ross's showdown.
All stuff we discussed. Aaron's right on the money there. Wednesday 831 says, so I rewatched this and I forgot how charming and sweet it is. Loved the hockey, loved the romance. The movie managed to not get bogged down in the weeds, which I appreciated. Don't think too hard about the regular season losses. They're just 2 wins away from the playoffs. That's all you need. In terms of tweaks, I'd cut the slow-mo tooth falling. It's unnecessary ick. I'd also cut the parents at the dinner scene, as the movie never closes that arc, and use that extra time to flesh out LaFlamme, who is likewise underdeveloped. We need at least one more scene of his rebound, or a scene to show him and Doug and the team connecting. Again, all stuff. The flaws in this movie are so obvious.
Yeah. Aside from the tooth thing, I like the tooth.
Yeah. Darvin111 says, I forgot how charming and lovely Alison Pill is in Goon. It's funny this movie is kind of a template for the hockey stuff in Letterkenny and Shoresy. Oh, I was like, why does that sound familiar? That's Robin Taylor.
Yeah.
We only copied and pasted it. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually I write Robin on there, but I forgot to. Sorry.
Thank you to everyone who contributed, and thank you, Josh, for joining us. Once again, you can find Josh, his podcast, Talking Smack, Superhero Movies, Animation, and Comics, over at Blue Sky, Talking Smack pod.bluesky.social, or you have a Discord server of your own.
We do. And really quick, I just had to look it up. I got a little excited and then really disappointed really quickly because I looked up the mascot for the Chicago Fire. Mm-hmm. They are black and white. They're a Dalmatian. I thought it was a cow for a quick second, and it's like, oh my god, is this happening? But no, it's a Dalmatian named Sparky, which also seems kind of wildly inappropriate, but also awesome. But for conversations like this, where we talk movies or sometimes we talk sports, there's a really weird wrestling kick that's happening with me and a few other people. John Cena has turned heel, so we must discuss.
Yeah, yes.
We're having conversations like that over in our Discord and on the podcast. You can find the link to our Discord in every episode description. So please come on over, have a discussion, and talk some wacky comic book stuff. A friend of mine reminded me that there's a Thanos annual issue comic that's out there where he's just torturing a poor man named David. From the day he's born, he returns on every birthday that David has and does something awful. Like on his 5th birthday, he murders his dad by dropping the car on him. So there's wacky comic book stuff that's going on all the time in our Discord.
Sick.
Well, you can also check out our Discord amongst other various social medias in order to get in touch with us. We're still over on the facebook.com/IHaveSomeNotes. We're at I Have Some Notes Pod on Instagram, at I Have Some Notes.bluesky.social over on Blue Sky, and as I mentioned off the top there, our Discord server, please join in the conversation. There's always some great talk going on there. We talk TV, we talk movies, we talk whatever. We just like to talk with you, our listeners. While you're doing that as well, you should also give us a little rating and a review on your podcatcher of choice, because that always helps us out.
And of course, you can head over...
Oops, sorry, go ahead. I thought it was me. You go.
Nope, it's me. It's Patreon time. You can head over to patreon.com/I Have Some Notes right now. We appreciate your financial support, and there's some cool bonus content that we have recorded. And Scott's feet pics, maybe. Probably not. That's not true. Just good bonus content.
I rated them a 5 on FeetWiki.
Thank you.
Hey, do you guys know that the Russo brothers are at it again? They're back making mediocre Netflix garbage. We kind of slept on The Gray Man. There's a movie that is apparently called The Electric Slate that sucks, and we're gonna fix it. So check that out in 2 weeks.
I think Electric State.
Electric State. I'm sorry. I'm looking right at the poster and I still read it wrong. Electric Slate.
Until then, I'm Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep your elbows up, Canada.